My name is Taylor. I'm talking about conflict tonight, specifically in the context of marriage. But as you may have experienced, conflict can happen outside of marriage too. Crazy thought. So although we are talking marriage-wise, a lot of the principles that we will be talking about will carry over to relationships in general. So it applies to everyone, so no one can pretend to not have it apply to them. I did bring my wife Lauren to verify anything that I say as far as
fact check.
Marriage truth or not truth, or specific to our marriage, I should say. But we, looking at conflict in marriage, it's funny to compare to relationship-wise conflict in dating or conflict in premarital relationship, and then all the way to marriage. How I think of it kind of like as a stair step, an escalator of sorts. A stair step to awesomeness, and with conflict, a stair step to even more and more conflict, and deeper conflict. And so, for just kind of an FYI, heads up, something that I had my eyes open to was the fact that it is an escalator or staircase of the conflict world versus just, oh yeah, well, everything's been great so far, and so for the most part, things will keep going great. I mean, that is not the case at all, and I love my wife a ton, and we still have conflict, and it's crazy the stuff that you can have conflict over, as I'm sure you just found out a few minutes ago, the silly rando stuff. I mean, we were trying to think, when we first got married, we had so many conflicts about finances, and not like big, huge discussions on like, okay, do we want to, tithe this money in this way, or do we want to spend, X amount of dollars on entertainment or on food? But it was like, I can't remember the specific thing, but something like a $10 item. And I'm not a spender of money, and my wife doesn't bother her to spend money as much. And so, I mean, it would be like 2-hour debate and conversation about this $10 purchase, and it was well beyond, obviously, about the $10 purchase after the first 20 minutes, but yet the conversation still continued to be about this $10 item. And so conflict is obviously a crazy thing, but one thing that we will face for the rest of our lives, married, friendship, otherwise, in relationships. So this should be hopefully very valuable to us, and hopefully educational, and kind of good for us to step back and assess how we involve ourselves in conflict, and how we can help understand other people better in conflict as well. So we'll go ahead and cue up Mark. All right, well, we're going to get into some discussion about what we talked about, what we heard Mark talk about, and so that'll come from a little bit, you guys getting in groups, sometimes individually, sometimes we'll mix it up a little bit with the group, so just pay attention because it's going to go crazy. But to start off, what do you guys say as far as, is conflict a good thing or a bad thing? So people around you, this is a group time, so just discuss amongst yourselves whether conflict is a good thing or a bad thing, and we'll hear from you in a second.
It's like when you had a text just
all right, let's go ahead and find out what you say. Who, by hand, first, who would say conflict is a bad thing? Really? Okay, who would say it's a good thing? Man, I'm staying away from you people. Seeking out conflict. Did everyone raise their hand?
No.
Cheaters?
There's a both option.
Yeah, I
What's
mean,
that?
there needs
I
to
think there
be.
should be.
Okay, well, those of you that said it's a bad thing, go ahead and explain yourself. Okay, great. Now those of you that said it's a good thing, explain yourself.
You should use the analogy.
Here go the eyeglasses.
Yeah, well, that's what you get for having a debater. No, just that, I mean, all relationships are kind of based on vulnerability at some level. Like you let someone else into something that they can hurt you with. And times of conflict are basically like just throwing vulnerability up on the wall and expecting to get hurt. And people who are in vulnerable situations, who are really kind of forward about being vulnerable, for whatever reason it is, whether they've been expecting something, whether they were actually genuinely wronged, and they're just throwing that out, saying, there it is, I can't hold it in anymore. Expect to be hurt, and that's, at least in my experience, why it's so hard not to get pulled into hurting them, is because that's what they're looking for. And it's easy to find what you're looking for. But if you don't have that vulnerability, if you don't have situations where because we're always going to miss it. We're always not going to be aware. There's always something that we're going to get wrong. And if somebody doesn't have the freedom to throw it up on the wall and deal with it and give you an opportunity to love them there, then it's just like he said, that if you don't fight, you gave up caring a long time ago.
So you would say from the standpoint it's good because it allows someone to express themselves and get that out.
The conflict itself is usually caused as a consequence of needing more vulnerability.
Okay.
That you aren't being vulnerable or haven't been met in a vulnerable place, and so conflict comes out of that, which is a powerful thing. Isn't really good or bad, but can be used really powerfully for either side.
Okay.
If you respond to it well, it can care for them exactly where they need to be loved, that you didn't know before. If you deal with it wrongly, you can really devastate somebody in a place where they're really vulnerable.
Okay, so you're saying conflict is neutral, but the effects of it have the potential for good, but also maybe the potential for bad, depending on how people actually handle that.
Yeah, just like Joel said.
Joel said that?
I say lots of things.
Pretty sure you did, yeah.
Other yeses or goods for conflict? Yeah.
I would say it all depends on who you're in conflict with. I mean, there are relationships that you might have that are negative. That if you're in conflict with that person, it's going to be a fight. But if you and Lauren have a conflict, and you guys in general are communicating with each other, are in general serving each other, then the conflict is more, this is what I believe, this is what I believe, let's talk about it and come to a resolution, than necessarily a name calling, you're a jerk, we end up sleeping in separate rooms sort of thing.
So why is it a good thing?
It's a good because it allows each person to state where they stand on something and to come to a mutual resolution where they can both walk forward from that. But it can be devastating if the conflict becomes a chance for barbs to be thrown at each other and to emotionally kill each other.
This thing, is, my opinion, is more important than you.
How many of you enjoyed being disciplined as a child? You would just love being spanked? No? All right. I guess I grew up from Oklahoma, different crap. But, yeah, none of us would say we enjoyed being disciplined as children, right? But who would say that discipline, obviously it looks differently, but discipline in general is a wise thing for parents to do to their kids? Okay, why?
Kids need it.
Yeah, they do.
I'm thankful for it now. Like,
we all
looking back. I mean, imagine me without this. Just think about that for a minute. Watch out.
Yeah. I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just saying that discipline gives you, because there's rules or boundaries, you have freedom. Because if you just have no boundaries, there's no safety. But if you have the boundaries and the rules, and that's basically what discipline creates, then you can actually have freedom within those boundaries.
Yeah, so ultimately discipline is leading toward freedom, but yet there's some type of something that you're giving up. And conflict is very similar in the sense that no one would probably say, even though people are saying the conflict can be good, none of us would say that the actual act of conflict is good. I mean, hopefully, maybe there's some crazy people out there that really do love fighting, that really do get the testosterone flowing, and they're MMA people, and they're like, I can't actually legally punch this person, but with my words I can, and so that's awesome to go do that. Okay? But for the most part, we're not going to say conflict itself is good. We'd probably say it's not very fun, it's not pleasant, it's not a treat. But what it can produce can be good, like we're saying, because it leads us in growth. Growth in relationship with that other person, in being understood and being able to, okay, let's move toward that resolution, but also independently ourselves as we learn how to selflessly hear that person, care for that person, and give up maybe our own agenda in some ways so that we can move toward a resolution. And so for me, that's an easy picture for me to see. Not a good thing at the time, but that actually leads to growth and health. And so in the same way, conflict, not a good thing at the moment, but it does lead to growth and health. Second question for you guys in the group. This is in your packets here. We're going to switch to the packet. And question 1, of the ways to respond to a conflict, flee, shut down, push for resolution, win at all costs, etc. Do men and women tend to lean toward one of these ways? Go ahead, keep your group, discuss, and find out what you think. All right, let's find out. Men and women, what do they tend to do during conflict?
They want to stay men.
Who wants to be bold and make predictions on both genders here?
Well, one thing that kind of came up in our, because we have Latin lady here with us, we talked about first, obviously, like I think generally men are more aggressive and will push for resolution. Women tend to be more passive and shut down. But that's a little bit indicative of our culture. If you look at Latin American culture, and if you look at really just cultures in general, if you do any study of cultures in general, every culture has very different, tendencies within the culture. So like Latin American culture, for example, women tend to be a lot more feisty and will push for and a lot of times the men are very passive. So it just kind of depends on the culture. It really depends on the individual. But I think that if you were to say male and female humanity, I would venture to say that, more aggressive. But I'm open to thoughts and arguments.
Who wants to argue with Joel? What's the conflict?
I would agree with the individual thing that he said. I mean, every girl that I've dated and known has had new and interesting ways to fight with me. So.
Yeah, that's a great quote. Every girl that I've dated has had new and interesting ways.
I mean, and I don't feel like I fit in, like what Joel just said generally about guys, that's not me at all. Like I'm the exact opposite. So I mean, I think you can stereotype, but I think that stereotyping in any sort of way like that actually adds to the conflict.
Definitely. It's a dangerous thing when we kind of assume maybe about certain things, and then especially if we've never conflicted with that person before, then that might actually be a much bigger and deeper conflict because you're actually going to be fighting not about the issue, but about the fact that you're attacking that person differently than they would ever want to be attacked. So that's definitely dangerous. How many of you guys would say that you are fighting people? That you want to jump in and duke it out?
Like I want to resolve conflict.
Okay, so you want to resolve, but this is more like I want to win. That's all right. I mean, yeah. All right. So how many are win people? Resolve people. Really, I can't leave until we figure this out. Like I said, that like girl apologize. That's actually me. Lauren will tell you. I'm like, hey, we need to talk about this and figure this thing out. So it's not just girls. A couple people. Okay, the fleeing people that just want to run the junk away. Okay, and then what's the last thing? Shut down. I'm not talking. Everything's fine, right? Because I'm not talking. Yeah. That's my life.
I feel like it's missing. There's just got to be an appeaser in there somewhere.
An appeaser?
Yeah, the one that just goes along like, oh, I don't want to fight, but I'll just go with what you say.
I would say that's probably the shut down mentality of I'm not going to contribute anymore. I'm going to try to do whatever I can to cool the flames a little bit there. Amen. Definitely. So why is conflict an expected part of good marriage? Individually, you can just.
People have different views on different things. Conflict doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be angry all the time, that you're going to be always fighting all the time. It just means that you have a disagreement on a certain area, and that it's good to talk it out, good to talk about it, because sometimes you can even persuade your spouse to think differently, and he or she will say, hey, never thought of it that way. Thanks for opening my eyes.
That is true, but a dangerous one, so I'm going to warn you to be careful on that one. At any point in time, if your goal is to persuade them, be very cautious. Not that might be that might be what does happen, but just be careful because I think I'm 0 for 150 or something like that. So.
If you're in conflict ever with the other person, then you're never experiencing anything new about that person. So if you aren't in conflict, then you aren't growing as a couple.
I would venture to say that, setting marriage aside, in friendship circles or family or whatever, the people who you're close to, you're going to fight with because you're close to them. There's more reasons to fight because you're constantly around. You're going to see different things. If you're married and you're not fighting, or, you know, having some sort of conflict, you might not be seeing enough of each other.
And it might not be the frequency or the quantity of which you're seeing each other. You might hang out all the time, but
Right.
what might be true about the way that you're spending time together?
I think
You're
in a
watching
marriage,
movies.
You're what?
You're watching movies all the time.
There you go, yeah.
I think in a marriage specifically, it's because like there's two people who are trying to unify their lives. So just looking in on my sister's marriage, like they had separate bank accounts and separate houses, and one had a dog and the other didn't. And like unifying those two things, you now are bringing together two sets of opinions, two sets of upbringings, and all that. So I think like the unifying is what we should strive for. It is a good thing, but when you do that, there's going to be like bumps in the road and things you have to figure out, not necessarily in a fighting way, but you know sometimes compromise on, or like just come to a resolution.
Yeah, so I'll go back there and then touch on that. So when we're spending a ton of time together with somebody, but we're not having much conflict, it might be the fact that we, you know, to what we were talking about earlier, the vulnerability might not be there, and there might not really be any depth in our relationship. That, you know, our family and our friends that are close to us, we're close with them, the amount of time we spend with them, but also that we share life. We literally share what's going on, the good, the bad, the ugly. And so if you're not having conflict, it might be that everything really is great, but all you have is a paper-thin relationship, marriage, friendship, whatever. And so none of us seek a paper-thin relationship. We want our close friends, our family, our wife, or our husband to be a deep relationship. And so if that is something that's happening, if you step back and say, man, everything is going great, we're not fighting at all, that's a warning flag that we probably don't have the depth of relationship that we would want to have. And then to Tiffany, what you're saying, for sure, I mean, what is the cause of conflict at the root of it? What is the cause of it?
Selfishness.
Yeah, selfishness. Our pride. I mean, until we get married, who is in charge of life for us?
Us.
Yeah. Well, Christian answer is God, but what translates is us, okay? Nobody, once we get out of our house, you know, we are cruising on the freeway, we're in the driver's seat, this is awesome, and I get to make the calls, I get to go buy the little, you know, toy poodle, I get to do whatever I want, because no, it doesn't affect anybody else. And then, all those years of being, and even if it's only 18 years that you've been single and you get married, not advocating 18-year-old marriage, but if that happens, that's still 18 years worth of you having that in your mind, in your life, in every situation, that I do what I please and I don't have to worry about the repercussions, obviously to some extent. And now you're in a relationship where everything you do, everything, affects the other person in some way, shape, or form. And so the fact that we were selfish, you know, back when we were single, newsflash, doesn't change when we become married. In fact, we a lot of times experience it even more so. We're more aware of it because we're clashing, because all of a sudden now all those things that we did and that we kind of lived out of our own desires affects the other person, and a lot of times they don't jive with that person. And so it is constantly a cycle of finding our selfishness and then choosing, okay, as conflict arises through selfishness, do I die to self in that, or am I going to continue to live out in that and see the conflict not resolved, because we can't resolve something if we're both going to be selfish and remain on our own sides. Okay, this one we're going to have you talk, if you're a guy, talk to guys, girls, talk to girls as best you can. Don't have to know too much. But question 3. Very curious to hear the responses from the genders. Explain this comment. A man can't win when he fights with his wife.
Oh my gosh.
A man can't win when he fights with his wife. Ladies talk to ladies, guys talk to guys.
I know.
Yeah. Can the man win the fight? Let's start off. If you would say that you agree with the statement, a man cannot win the fight, defend your perspective. So if you agree with the statement, a man cannot win when he fights with his wife.
I would say that nobody wins in a fight. Like if somebody's winning, then both people lose. So I would agree with that statement because I feel like a man cannot win when he fights with his wife, and a woman cannot win when she fights with her husband. Because if they're winning, then it's selfish and the marriage is lost in that case.
But what if the woman doesn't know that it's actually going to benefit her, and so the husband wins, and so it's actually better for the wife even though she doesn't know it?
What?
Good luck.
Hints also, win fights or conflicts, confuse the enemy. Good point, Tiffany. Anyone else agree with the statement?
Yeah, I do. Basically for the same reason, except I want to throw the concept of being one together. That if you're overpowering someone else, if either party is, they're not actually being one. There's a separation cause there.
Unless my sinful self needs to be overpowered.
That's true.
Sometimes I'm sinful and I don't know it, and I need somebody to point it out to me. And when they win and point out my sinful, selfish nature, I win. So I do think if a husband or wife have conflict and disagreement, and that wife is sinful and she recognizes her sin, the husband wins. And so does the wife. But if it's not about that, if it's just about who's right and who's wrong, I think that the statement is true in that sense that it's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things for a man leading his wife, to be able to lead in a way that is pulling her away from sin, pulling her to freedom, in a way that is loving, to not make them feel like they failed or that they're, you know, in the wrong some way, even though when we're in sin, obviously we're in the wrong. And so, you know, that is a very, there's no easy, like, oh, here are the 3 steps to process in that. You know? It's a very challenging thing, but to just make you aware that that is a challenge to fight the tension of, okay, you know, ladies need to express ourselves and the emotions, and sometimes they're not really being fully truthful, and they know they're not being truthful, but they just need to express that. And so as a man, to understand, okay, does this need to be addressed, or do I just need to bear with my wife during this time, versus, okay, I'm seeing something in her or even in him that needs to be brought up, and it really is not healthy, and it's really something that's burdening him or enslaving him in some way. Does my wife have a point?
Yeah, I have a thought. In that, I think the phrase like win, and I'm gonna talk to girls for a second. We know that we're emotional, and sometimes we're really passive aggressive, and if I cry, I win. And so I think a lot of times,
Preach.
at least for me, like there are times that I was telling her, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm totally using my girly emotion crazy wife to get what I want, but that's not respecting him, which then in turn doesn't allow him to love me well. So if I'm respecting Taylor in that conflict, then he can love me well, and like Joel said, it's a win-win. If I'm in sin, he's loving me and leading me in that. If he's in sin, I'm respecting him enough to call him out on that.
Oh. And yeah.
To kind of go off of what you just said, but on the guy side, I think that the statement, you know, that Mark made about you know, if a guy wins, he loses, and if he loses, he loses. It, I think, is disrespectful in a sense. I think it can be true, but if you're married to somebody and y'all are both seeking to be servants, that sort of attitude or thought process can drive a wedge and say, I don't trust my wife to be able to admit when she's wrong, or to be able to, it almost in my view would cause me to disengage and say, I'm not even going to talk to my wife about this, because either way it's going to just blow up in my face.
So, sorry, let me say that again for me.
Okay.
I know you said a lot, so.
I think that statement about, you know, either way a guy's going to lose and conflict with his wife doesn't give enough respect or credit to the wife, because it doesn't allow them to actually properly respond to you in the way that they're called to as your wife. If my attitude when I'm fighting with a woman is I'm going to lose this no matter whether I'm right or wrong or she's right or wrong or whatever, it's just going to end badly, then I'm already going into it saying this is going to be negative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a great point on that is the fact that if you as a husband, wife, or friend in a relationship think that you are a better friend, spouse because you don't enter conflict, that's a lie. Because there are plenty of things that need to be addressed or expressed that are going to lead to conflict that if they don't get touched, they will grow, they will fester, and they will become worse. And so for us to have the attitude that, well, I avoid it, and so that's a good thing. And I'm not putting down the avoiders because we avoid conflict because we don't like it. But you know what, I feel like I could go into this, but you know what, I'm going to be more godly, and I'm just going to leave it be, is actually a lie, and is actually more harmful most times, if not all. And so, yeah, for us to have the attitude that I'm going to just do this because I think I'm already going to lose, if we're having the me perspective in it, like, well, how is this going to affect me? Then that's a really dangerous thing to be taking into a relationship in general, but especially into a conversation or conflict, because it shows the fact that you're not out about resolution. You're out about, well, what's my interest, in this thing. Okay, other direction here. Still, guys and girls, what is a prudent response when your husband walks away from an argument with you? So question 4. What is the prudent response? Sorry. Let's just take answers here. So we'll see the difference between the girls and the guys.
It depends on why he walked away. If he walked away because he needs a moment to cool down, regather, recuperate, then you need to let him walk away. But if he was walking away because you've been a jerk, then you may want to reach out at least a little bit and apologize.
Fellas?
I think that was spot on.
Okay. Jared?
Yeah, well, my question would be, are you going to be able to differentiate in the moment whether or not it's for him to clear his mind, or in your mind, you're viewing him as being a jerk?
I mean, being yourself being a jerk, not him being a jerk. Like,
okay.
If he's being a jerk, then you probably just need to let him have his moment. But if you're being a jerk, if the woman's being a jerk, then if she recognizes it, because he walks away, kind of like she did when she woke up. She was a little bit late, but if you realize it in the moment and you can apologize and resolve the conflict before he gets to the point where he has to take a walk, then I say resolve it then. But if you can't and he needs to take a walk, then take a walk.
I think this goes back to the kind of conflict style. We could ask the question, well, are girls or guys more this or that? Probably would depend on every single person in the room being different. And so, we probably would respond or want to respond the way that that person needs it or wants it. And not just what's good for them, but what is the team answer here? What is the selfless, unifying answer? Is it the fact that I need to apologize to them? Is it the fact that I need to share some information that I didn't really share during the conflict that helped clarify it and wasn't really going to be on my side of the argument, and so I need to put that out there? But I would say that more important than the timing of it, because again, my tendency is I want to talk about it, I want to resolve it right then and there. But that's not always what my wife needs, or not what other people need. They might need time to process and reflect and think, but ultimately the idea that whatever is the humble and selfless thing to do based upon the conflict, to do that whenever that time arises. That might mean you go find them. It might mean that you let them do their thing, and the next time that you see them at dinner is when you have that moment of apologizing or of laying yourself down in order to resolve and show them that, hey, I'm putting you before myself, and I desire for you to be more than me in this relationship. Did you have a question?
I think that what keeps coming up is the fact that we need to know how the other person fights. We talk so much, like, as Christians, we're like, oh, what's your love language? You need to know your spouse's love language. I think we also kind of need to talk about what your fight language is and figure out what that is, so that way you not know what to expect in the way that Andy was talking about, where you're like, oh, well, you're just going to blow me off, so whatever. But if you know, okay, you might need a couple seconds to get yourself together, if I know that about the person that I'm fighting with, I'm not going to take that time to say, oh, what is he thinking about? Why is he leaving? Because if I know that that's how he deals with conflict, then I can let that be and know that a resolution is going to come.
Yeah. We're going to actually move on because we're almost out of time, sorry, to nix those questions or comments. But question 6, this is the last one I want to just kind of wrap up with. Why do couples need to place importance on being friends with each other? What does this involve? What does this look like? And I'll just kind of answer because we don't have time. But Mark said there, the difference between friend and lover, and that, a lot of times we view marriage as lover and like 99% lover, and yeah, that we're friends, but it's lover focused. And the reality of it is that it is friendship based, and that if it's not friendship based and it's focused on lover, you could have the first year of your marriage, the first 5 years of your marriage be awesome, and lover is what describes it. But if that is the only thing which holds it together, then it will decay and it will break over time, because that is not strong enough to hold you together, because there is so much more in life that you're going to be doing and experiencing that requires a friendship base. And so that if that is the foundation, being just in the fact that we sleep together, that is not enough. But that it really is the kind of cherry, the icing on the top, that is the joy package that wraps everything, spiritual foundation in the Lord and foundation in friendship together, and really is a awesome thing to hold it. But a lot of times, the guy that married us, pastor, said that a lot of times we think that the more sex we have, the healthier marriage we'll have, and it's actually not the case. But it is true that the healthier the marriage you have, the more sex you'll have. That there is a direct proportion there, but not here. So just by going and let's just make love every night, and we'll cover a multitude of sins, and we'll be great, we'll have an awesome relationship, that is not true. But the fact is that as we have a foundation in friendship, and that we are lovers, that we will see obviously a lot of love being made, but that it's not the focus of it. It really is just the kind of icing on the cake rather. Don't get tape and icing mixed up there. Hold it all together. It'd be kind of a bad prank there. But the idea I want to kind of close with is, we've talked about the goal in conflict is resolution, or should be resolution. And the fact that what causes it, selfishness, pride, and those things, and how we can conflict well, or discuss things heatedly well, is by being humble, selfish, and placing the person before us. Just as husbands were called to love our wives like Jesus loves the church, wives respect our husbands, and so it's this beautiful display of imaging relationship of God and the church. And so throughout all these conflicts and all the discussions and all the fights that we can have with all people throughout our entire life, if we can keep the main thing in the sense that the relationship is far more important than whatever we're fighting about. And if we remember that, and if we can keep that perspective and know that, that will help us a lot to avoid the long discussions about the $10, buying of a extra large, Coca-Cola or something. It's a really expensive Coke. It was really big.
They don't sell those in New York.
Exactly. So, but if the relationship, if we really do value the relationship over anything else, then that's going to overflow from the way that we have that conflict. And hopefully then the conflict will not be a fun thing in the time, but will turn into being a good, beneficial, and healthy thing moving forward. So let's pray, and we'll close up. God, just thank you for relationships. Thank you for just the fact that although we're full of sin, and that comes out, and that affects all kinds of things, and it has consequences, God, thank you that you have even redeemed conflict, that you have allowed that to be a mechanism that allows us to grow deeper in relationship, and allow us to grow deeper in your grace as we experience our selfishness, and get to experience your humility as you emptied yourself and counted it as nothing to be God, but just became a man to serve us, and that we would have the same attitude as we live now as single people, as we practice and have a chance to make this a habit of life as we experience conflict and grow from that, as we enter marriage and as we seek to love our spouse well and to grow in our marriage well. Through that, we just ask that you would give us self-control, give us wisdom, and that you would give us love for one another. We love you, and we pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.